You are not the first human. That is not a philosophical statement. It is not a spiritual metaphor. It is what the oldest written texts in human history explicitly claim. That before you, before every person alive today, before every civilization recorded in every history book ever written, there were others. Earlier versions, attempts, humans created and then destroyed, erased so completely that the only evidence of their existence is pressed into clay tablets that spent 4,000 years buried under the ruins of cities most people have never heard of. The Sumerians, the world's first civilization, did not believe humanity began once and continued in a straight line to the present day. They believed humanity was the result of a process, long failed, repeatedly restarted process, 5 versions that did not work. 5 populations created, observed, found insufficient, and destroyed, before the 6th version, the one that survived. Before us, the tablets that record this process are in museums right now. The cuneiform is translated, the story is documented, and what it describes across 4,000 years of clay and silence is a history of human existence that no school has ever taught. To understand why the Sumerians believed in multiple human versions, you first have to understand who they believed created humans and why. The Sumerians were the world's first civilization. They built the first cities in the river plains between the Tigris and Euphrates in what is now southern Iraq. They invented writing around 3200 BCE. They wrote everything down. Every myth, every law, every story about where the world came from. And their answer to where humans came from was specific, documented, and deeply uncomfortable. Before humans existed, the universe was run by 2 classes of divine beings: the Anunnaki, the great gods who held authority, and the Igigi, the lesser gods who performed physical labor. The Igigi dug the rivers, maintained the canals, kept the waterways of civilization functioning. They worked without rest for 40 years. Then they stopped. They burned their tools. They surrounded the palace of Enlil, the most powerful of the Anunnaki, in the middle of the night and refused to continue. The world's first recorded labor strike, the Anunnaki convened an emergency council. And the god Enki, the god of wisdom, proposed a solution: create a new being made from clay mixed with the blood of a slaughtered god. Being designed to perform the labor the Igigi refused. They called the first attempt Lullu, the primitive worker. The first attempt, documented in the Atrahasis Epic, failed immediately. The first version of humanity was Lullu, the primitive worker, created from clay and divine blood. It's designed to dig rivers and maintain canals. The text describes Lullu as functional, capable of labor, but without the social organization, communication, or self-regulation that stable civilization required. Wild, uncontrollable, incapable. Of the organized collective labor the gods needed, the Anunnaki Council observed the first version and found it insufficient. Not evil, not wicked, insufficient, an imperfect tool that did not perform its intended function adequately. The decision to abandon the first version was not emotional, it was practical. The gods needed workers who could maintain complex irrigation infrastructure across a large geographic area. Lullu could not do that. The first version was set aside, and the council began again. The second version addressed the deficiencies of the first, more sophisticated cognitive capacity, better communication, improved social organization. And this version worked for a time. The humans of the second version multiplied. They built settlements. They maintained the canals. They performed the labor the gods required. But multiplication created a problem the gods had not fully anticipated. More humans meant more disease vectors. More concentrated populations meant epidemic spread. The second version was not destroyed by a divine decision. It was destroyed by plague, a catastrophic epidemic that swept through the concentrated human settlements of the river plains. The Atrahasis Epic describes Enlil sending disease deliberately unable to sleep because of the noise the growing population produced. The plague reduced the human population catastrophically. For a generation, the river plains fell silent. Then the survivors began to multiply again, and the problem returned. If you are watching this and wondering whether the Sumerian texts actually name each version as a separate attempt, stay with me. Because the next section is where the archaeological evidence and the ancient genetics converge on the same answer from two completely independent directions. Subscribing takes 2 seconds. Let's keep going. The third version inherited the survivors of the plague, rebuilt from a reduced genetic foundation, and grew again. This time, Enlil's response was not disease, it was drought. The rains stopped, the crops failed. The canals that the humans maintained began to dry. The text describes a progressive famine spreading across the human world over years, reducing the population, silencing the noise that disturbed Enlil's existence. The god Enki, who had created the humans and felt responsible for them, intervened. He taught a human named Atrahasis how to direct the prayers of the population toward the specific god of rain and crops. The rain returned, the crops recovered, humans multiplied. Again, the noise returned. Enlil's frustration, documented in the translated cuneiform, moved from irritation to determination. The next attempt would not be reversible. The fourth version ended in water. Enlil brought the matter before the full divine council. He presented the case for total destruction. Floods so complete, drawing water from above and below simultaneously that nothing would survive. The council agreed. They swore an oath of secrecy. Every god bound by the same promise, no warning to the humans. Total annihilation. The flood described in the Atrahasis Epic is the same flood that appears, with different names and different gods, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the Eridu Genesis, and eventually in the biblical book of Genesis. The same flood, the same story. Pressed into clay tablets across multiple civilizations and multiple centuries, the flood lasted 7 days and 7 nights. When it ended, the land that had held millions of humans held almost nothing. The fourth version had been erased, almost completely. The word almost is doing significant work in that sentence. Because Enki found a way around the oath of silence. He could not warn the humans directly. The oath prevented it. So he went to the reed hut of Atrahasis, the one human he had chosen, and he spoke not to Atrahasis but to the wall. He addressed the reed wall of the hut. "O wall, listen to me. O reed wall, pay attention to all my words. Tear down your house. Build a boat. Abandon your possessions. Save living things." Atrahasis understood. He built the boat. He loaded his family and animals. And he survived the flood that destroyed the fourth version. He was the seed of the fifth. The bridge between the destroyed fourth version and whatever came next. His survival was not the continuation of the old version. It was the beginning of a new one. The fifth version is the one that the Sumerian texts do not fully describe, because it is not mythology. It is genetics. 70,000 years ago, a supervolcano erupted on the island of Sumatra. The volcano was called Toba. The eruption was the largest in the past 2 million years of Earth's geological history. It ejected approximately 2,800 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere, enough to block sunlight across large portions of the northern hemisphere for years. The resulting volcanic winter killed vegetation, destroyed food chains, and reduced the human population of the Earth to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. Depending on which genetic study you consult, the number may have been as low as 3,000 total breeding adults. On a planet that today holds 8 billion people, 3,000. The evidence for this near extinction is not from clay tablets, it is from human DNA. Every human being alive today shows a dramatic reduction in genetic diversity at a point approximately 70,000 years ago. A genetic bottleneck so severe that the entire human species today is less genetically diverse than a single troop of chimpanzees. We are all, every human alive, descended from the tiny population that survived the Toba event. The fifth version nearly did not make it. It survived not because of divine intervention, it's not because of a boat, not because a god spoke to a wall. It survived because 3,000 people in Africa stayed alive through the worst volcanic winter in 2 million years, and multiplied, became everyone. The 5 failed versions line up against the physical evidence with a precision that is difficult to dismiss. Version 1, Lullu, the primitive worker, corresponds to early archaic human populations that did not develop the cognitive complexity required for organized civilization. Archaeological evidence for fully modern human behavior. Symbolic thinking. Complex language, organized social structures, does not appear in the record until approximately 70 to 100,000 years ago. Before that threshold, the physical record shows human-like populations without the full package of capabilities that define us. Insufficient. Set aside. Version 2, destroyed by plague, corresponds to the multiple population collapse events documented in the ancient DNA record before the emergence of behaviorally modern humans. Version 3, destroyed by drought and famine, corresponds to the documented arid periods of the African Pleistocene that repeatedly reduced human population ranges to small refugia along coastal areas and river systems. Version 4, destroyed by flood, corresponds to the global sea level rise at the end of the last ice age approximately 12,000 years ago, a rise so dramatic up to 120 meters above pre-glacial levels. It submerged coastal settlements across every inhabited continent. Every ancient civilization has a flood story. It's not because they all independently invented the same myth. It's because they all preserve the memory of the same event. The near-extinction that the DNA of every human alive today still carries in its reduced diversity. 5 versions. 5 mechanisms. 5 near-extinctions. Each one documented in either ancient text, archaeological record, or human genetics. The Popol Vuh, the creation text of the Maya civilization of Mesoamerica, tells the same story from the other side of the planet. Written in the 16th century, but based on oral traditions reaching back thousands of years, the Popol Vuh describes 4 previous failed human creation attempts before the current version. The first humans were made of mud, they dissolved. The second humans were made of wood. They could speak but had no souls and were destroyed by flood. The third humans were made of a different wood and were destroyed by their own tools turning against them. The fourth humans were made of maize, the fourth material, and were found to be too powerful, with vision equal to the gods. Their sight was deliberately limited. Then came the fifth creation, the current humans, Sumerians, in Mesopotamia, the Maya in Mesoamerica. 2 civilizations separated by an ocean, with no documented contact, telling the same story. Multiple failed versions before the current one. Series of destructions and restarts. A final version that survived, but only after being deliberately limited. Made less than the gods, given death as a ceiling, given restricted vision as a boundary. The oldest texts on both sides of the planet agree on the structure of the story, even when they disagree on the details. That agreement across an ocean, across thousands of years, and civilizations with no documented connection, is the thing that keeps serious scholars returning to these texts. What made the 6th version us different from every version before? The Atrahasis Epic offers an answer that is more uncomfortable than most people expect. After the flood, after the divine argument between Enlil and Enki, the gods did not simply release humanity to grow unchecked. They built in controls. Enki proposed that instead of destroying humanity again, the gods should introduce limitations. Natural death, individual mortality with a defined lifespan, infertility among some women, mortality as a population regulator. The mechanisms that would prevent the human population from ever again growing large enough to disturb Enlil's sleep. The 6th version US was not created stronger than the previous versions. We were created weaker, with built-in expiry. With built-in population limits, the survival of the 6th version was not achieved through superior capability. It was achieved through deliberate limitation. The gods did not make us better. They made us mortal. And mortality, the thing every human fears most, is, according to the oldest texts ever written, the specific modification that allowed us to survive where 5 previous versions failed. You are not the first human. You are the first version that was made limited enough to last. The clay tablets recorded that 4,000 years ago. The genetics confirmed it 70,000 years later. The version that survived was the one that learned it was not permanent.